America great again.
RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, statements, or opinions of its guests, advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show.
Well, good evening, everyone. And, of course, welcome back. Yes, my friends, to a very nether exciting episode of the Red Pill News Live. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Do me a favor, hit that like button, help us out by sharing the show. Hit the thumbs up, hit the red pill, hit the hearts, whatever it might be, wherever you're at, whatever platform you're currently watching on. Do appreciate you joining us. Want to give a big shout out to Filter Dog as well, who says that Candace Owens makes public statement saying Erica Kirk had nothing to do with Charlie Kirk's murder after lawsuits are filed. Well, you know, you make public statements, you got to stand by them. Sometimes you got to make apologies. All right, so we've got a good show for you today. James Comey, in my estimation, is looking more and more likely like he's going to have to make a deal. And thanks to some of the legal maneuvering of the Biden administration, they have essentially destined him to have little to no defense if he does want to go to trial. So we'll go through all of that and so much more. We got a couple of updates for you. Got some news on Iran. Got some news in relation to some people getting what they deserve. Lots of good things. So do me a favor. Sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, because we're going to be right back after this.
So the way people think about retirement is changing. For years, it was pretty simple. You just bought stocks, bonds, and you hope that the market did its job over time. But with everything that's happening in the economy today, rising inflation, global uncertainty, some investors are starting to realize that they might need a more diversified approach. And that's where assets like crypto and precious metals are really starting to come into the conversation. Not as speculation, but as a way to make a thoughtful allocation as part of a long-term strategy. So with the crypto IRA, with My Digital Money, you can now invest in both crypto and precious metals using a structured retirement account. Your assets are going to be kept in cold storage, so they're offline and protected from any online threats, and they're also held with a regulated U.S. custodian and supported by a U.S.-based team, people you can actually talk to. So if you want to know how it works, find out by going to mydigitalmoney.com, or you can just click the link below, or you can even give them a call, and they will speak English. 833-636-2008. And if you want to ask about their promotion on how you can get up to $200 based on your investment, just enter RedPill78 in the promo code field when you see it on the website to be eligible. And when you support my sponsors, you support this channel.
All right. Thank you also to Trisha. This is a great idea. Ideally, that would be my wife, because she's in the house. She says, we need to designate one person to tell Zach if audio isn't working. We can change our own volume, maybe two people. What do you think, Zach? I think that even if we make an agreement right now publicly with everybody in the chat, undoubtedly there will be thousands more people who show up later and know nothing about that pre-existing agreement. So what I am going to do, because earlier today I tested Rumble Studio and everything was working fine, but then just before I go live, it looks like it's not really working in the way that it was earlier. So this has to be something that is wrong with Rumble Studio itself. It is in beta version right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to play the first clip as I normally would, and I'm going to keep a close eye on the chat. You guys let me know if you can hear the audio. If you can't, I have my backup all ready to go, and then we will immediately know from that point forward that I need to transition to my backup plan. Okay, so that's the way we're going to do it today. But thank you very much, Trisha, for suggesting it early, because I was going to do the same thing as well. But yes, honey, if you can hear me in the chat, do me a favor. And if you do hear something, if there is something wrong, just come and tell me immediately, because I'm probably not going to see it in the chat immediately. And it will also help, because then it makes sure that I have less editing to do on the back end when I upload the audio podcast. Because I tell you what, there's nothing worse than going through and removing a whole bunch of spots of dead air or me apologizing to the audience. So anyways, let us jump right into our first story today. That is going to be an update on the Oklahoma State Senate candidate Barry Christian. Now, this is an unsubstantiated claim, but it is coming from someone who is friends with the family on Facebook. Now, on this post, from their Facebook post, it says that Barry Christian was found murdered. Now, the person who posted it, it's been blacked out for the privacy of that individual. But they say, please lift up our friends Patty and Garth in prayer, as their son and my great friend was just found murdered. Why, Lord, why? We are heartbroken and pulled over on the side of the road. This is absolutely devastating. May the sorry person rot in hell that took his life. Now, they still have not released an official cause of death, and they only have put out just the briefest bits of videos, such as the one that we watched the other day. There have been a couple of local news stations, KOCO, that have done stories on this, and they did have some additional video, but it didn't really give us any more information. The one thing that I did glean is that close by to where his truck was found, along with his body, there was a large sign for his campaign. So I don't know. I can't really speculate any more than that. But I mean, I figured that if some friends of the family were putting out this announcement and saying that he was in fact murdered, this doesn't sound like it is just some situation where he pulled over on the side of the road and had a heart attack. Somebody else said, rest in peace, my friend. My love for you was greater than most could understand. I will see you on the other side. Now, I have seen another suggestion, which I don't give any credence to yet, but apparently there was a large child trafficking, child sex abuse, pornography raid that happened in this state very recently, just before this death occurred. Now, the person who posted this seemed to suggest that perhaps Mr. Christian could have been caught up in that, and then that would mean that this would be a suicide because he was going to get arrested. Now, I don't believe that that's the case, because if it was the case, he would have been named along with all of the other people who had been rounded up in this raid. So, considering the fact that the family and the friends of the family are saying that he was murdered, I think that's more likely. So we're going to continue to watch. We're going to see if KOCO, which is the local news station, has anything else to say about it. But as of right now, everything is still up in the air. No official cause of death has been given. So very, very tragic no matter what. All right, this is going to be our first test video of the day. And over the weekend, or maybe perhaps earlier this week, it was announced that the United Arab Emirates was going to be leaving OPEC. OPEC is the organization of oil-producing nations. And with the UAE leaving OPEC, that means that the restraints are off on how much oil they can produce, the price they can sell it for, and how much they can export. Previously, because they were part of OPEC, the UAE was using the Straits of Hormuz to deliver oil. Well, now they are no longer a member of OPEC, and that means they can pump and export oil at whatever price they want, and they can totally bypass the Straits of Hormuz. President Trump is totally in favor of this. I'm hoping that this will do something to lower gas prices for people here in the United States, but as everybody knows, we don't get any oil through the Straits of Hormuz. So the price that you're paying for gas, or the price that you're paying for diesel right now, is largely, well, it's entirely due to speculation and the greed of oil companies. So I'm going to play this clip. I need all of you to let me know whether or not you can hear the audio coming through. Let's begin.
Good morning, Dana. From an OPEC-free UAE also being celebrated today as that goes into effect. And the now former oil cartel member free to pump and export as much oil as it wants, including through a pipeline to bypass the Strait of Hormuz, which remains effectively closed. And General Zak Paine says the war is now ground to a stalemate.
They in their minds, cannot
Thank you, Jesus.
outlast us in the sense that political pressure, getting closer to the midterms, economic pressure with gas prices on the administration. They believe, even though we have the economic blockade, at some point we will end the war, stop everything, or make a deal with them.
And while enforcing the more than 2-week-old blockade, U.S. military Central Command says it has turned away 44 vessels. Good morning.
Nick's dad, he says, I left LFA about 3 months ago. So glad to have found Red Pill. I don't know who LFA is, but I'm glad to have you here, buddy. Thank you very much for joining us. Glad to have you on as part of the Red Pill crew. All right. Thank you also to 123SKG for the cookie. Appreciate it. Now, wait a second. People over on YouTube are saying that it's echoing badly. Well, that's a separate problem because I am pushing out a stream directly to YouTube, and then I have the OBS virtual camera going to our Rumble studio. Okay, so I'm going to have to obviously figure that out on another day, guys. So apologize to the people on YouTube. Hopefully we have minimal video clips for the rest of the show. I know there's going to be a couple, but hopefully it won't be too annoying. What I was trying to do is push out my 4K stream to YouTube because I can do that, but I can't do that on Rumble and the other platforms. So, so this is going to mean that I'm going to have to figure something else out in the future. Okay, so this maybe is going to be good news. Also, in relation to news surrounding Iran, President Trump had obviously been having a number of problems related to European countries, suggesting that they're not supporting us when we needed them to support us after all of these years, pumping quite literally trillions of dollars into NATO, ensuring that the governments of Germany, Italy, Spain, and many others are safe from the specter of what they believed was the Russian menace. We've already gone over in a number of different ways how President Trump has been reducing the presence of the United States in NATO, not only scaling back on the amount of money that we spend there, but also pulling U.S. troops from a number of key areas, and then also removing U.S. troops from command positions at NATO bases. Now, President Trump is suggesting that the NATO nations that I just mentioned, Germany, Italy, and Spain, may soon have a total drawdown of U.S. troops, which means there will no longer be any American military presence there. Apparently, there is some type of a feud that President Trump is having with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Prime Ministers Giorgio Meloni and Pedro Sanchez. This is all over situations with the war in Iran. It kind of started with the Spanish government, Pedro Sanchez, suggesting that the United States could not use Spanish airspace if we were going to be doing raids on Iran during the course of this conflict. Meloni and then Merz also piped in shortly after that. So President Trump has now made this threat to Merz after earlier this week. He had said that the United States was being humiliated by Iranian leadership, and he criticized the lack of strategy in the war that President Trump in Washington had. Now, obviously, Merz doesn't know everything that's going on behind the scenes, and I tend to believe that his statements were more about ego than anything else, because in administrations past, all of these NATO nations would likely have been involved in the decision-making process when it comes to something such as what we're seeing right now in the Middle East. And of course, I think ultimately the goal for President Trump is the ultimate removal of the United States from NATO, perhaps even having NATO shut down altogether, because it's quite literally obvious that these other European nations don't have either the manpower or the money to do what the United States has been doing over the last several decades. So the United States is now officially studying and reviewing the possible reduction of troops in Germany with a determination to be made over the next short period of time. President Trump said, on Truth Social. So the U.S. has got quite a few military bases and facilities in Germany. My father, I mentioned this before, but he served in the Army, and he served his tour of duty in Germany. After he was done with his time in the Army, he went and traveled Europe and saw a whole bunch of things. But obviously, his time in Germany had an effect on him. I thought it was pretty interesting over there. But with the presence of these military facilities, including headquarters for European and Africa Command, as well as Ramstein Air Base and Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, the German people are getting a tremendous benefit from the presence of U.S. troops. So on Tuesday, President Trump wrote, "The Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon." Maybe he does. I don't know if that's true. He doesn't know what he's talking about, though, President Trump said, saying it's no surprise that Germany is doing so poorly, both economically and in other respects. Germany has essentially crippled themselves in a number of ways. After fully buying into the Green New Deal scam and the idea of climate change and carbon reduction, they did the one thing that could have substantially helped out the environment. They killed a project that was the one thing that could have substantially helped out the environment, which was all of their nuclear plants. They just shut them all down. That's like the cleanest energy you can get. And as long as they're built properly and you've got people manning them who aren't totally retarded, then you're not going to have a problem with meltdowns and stuff like that. But instead, Germany, a relatively overcast country, I mean, it's not necessarily sunny and shiny like it is all the time down here in Florida. They basically bought into solar and wind, and they were getting fuel from Russia. Well, now they're not able to get all that fuel from Russia, and things are totally effed for the German people. President Trump said earlier yesterday that he would probably consider pulling U.S. troops out of Italy and Spain, as well as Germany, after announcing that we were doing the reduction in force investigation. We also have an internal Pentagon email that's been released to Reuters earlier this week, outlining what options the U.S. has to punish NATO allies it believes have failed to support U.S. operations in this dust-up with Iran, which includes suspending Spain from the alliance. Now, personally, I don't care if Spain remains part of NATO. If we are no longer part of NATO, let's just get everybody out of NATO. I think that the concept of needing a North Atlantic Treaty Organization to defend against the specter of Russian communism doesn't exist anymore. Russia doesn't want to go to war with everybody. Russia just wants to do their own thing, maintain their own relevance and their sphere of influence. And the United States is doing the exact same thing here in the Western Hemisphere as well. The European Union is totally ineffectual. They have stolen sovereignty from all of the nations. The people essentially have all of these unelected bureaucrats who are making decisions that are dictating their lives. And so Europe is a mess. I don't see any reason why we need to give them any more money or we need to give them anything at all. So when asked if he was considering pulling the troops out of Italy and Spain, President Trump said probably, since Italy has not been of any help to us and Spain has been horrible, absolutely horrible. The U.S. has just over 68,000 active duty military personnel that are permanently assigned to our bases in Europe. That was as of December of last year. And we have about half of those who are in Germany. So that would be a tremendous disadvantage for Germany in terms of their security, but also you got to imagine how much money American troops are spending in Germany while they're there as well. Now, also, President Trump has announced that officially the conflict with Iran is over, and as such, there is no need for a congressional war authorization. The War Powers Pact says that after a certain length of time without a congressional resolution, Congress needs to approve anything that's going forward. So now this is going to be a 20-second video, and I'm sorry, YouTube, you're probably going to get a little bit of echo.
Because it's never been sought before. There's been many times, and nobody's ever gotten it before. They consider it totally unconstitutional. But we're always in touch with Congress. But nobody's ever sought it before. Nobody's ever asked for it before. It's never been used before. Why should we be different?
Okay, was anything different over there on YouTube? Was anything different over there on Rumble? If it was, please let me know, because I won't see it pop up in the chat for another 10 seconds or so, probably. All right, so President Trump essentially saying there that there is no need for us to get the War Powers Resolution. And right here, writing to the Speaker of the House, he says, I write to inform you of changes in the posture of the United States forces in the United States Central Command Area of Responsibility. Too quiet. Again, this is a volume that was set by the person who uploaded the video. I have an individual volume control knob that I downloaded for Opera, and I keep turning it up to 400%, and then for some reason, the volume turns itself down again. So I'll try to remember to turn it up every single time. All right. So as part of my efforts to keep Congress fully informed and consistent with the War Powers Resolution Act, on March 2nd, 2026, I reported to Congress. That was no echo on YouTube. Much better. Great. Thank you for letting me know. I reported to Congress that on February 28th, the U.S. forces had initiated Operation Epic Fury and begun conducting precision strikes against the regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I ordered that operation consistent with my responsibility to protect Americans and United States interests at home and abroad, and in furtherance of the United States national security and foreign policy interests. On April 7th, I ordered a 2-week ceasefire. The ceasefire has since been extended. There has been no exchange of fire between the United States and Iran since April 7th. The hostilities that began February 28th have terminated. Despite the success of the U.S. operations against the Iranian regime and continued efforts to secure a lasting peace, the threat posed by Iran to the United States and our armed forces remains significant. Accordingly, the Department of War continues to update its force posture in the area of responsibility in select countries as necessary and appropriate to address the Iranian proxy forces threats and to protect the U.S. and its allies and partners. These changes are more fully outlined in the classified attachment to this letter. Of course, we don't get to see that. I have and will continue to direct United States Armed Forces consistent with my responsibilities and pursuant to my constitutional authority to conduct United States foreign relations and as Commander-in-Chief and Chief Executive. All right, so really, this is just a bit of housekeeping here. Like President Trump said, we are in the midst of a ceasefire. Nothing is going on. President Trump has also, during this same appearance with the press, come forward and said much what I said yesterday, that there seems to be a little bit of turmoil amongst the leadership ranks within Iran. There are competing organizations, competing groups of people who are seeking to take the reins of power in that country. And so they're all kind of butting heads. And it's one of the reasons why there hasn't been a finalized negotiation, because there's nobody in charge at this point. So I think what President Trump is doing is attempting to just kind of bring the country to its knees economically by keeping the Strait of Hormuz completely closed, not allowing Iran to get their oil out, not allowing them to sell to anybody. And basically, if they continue to pump oil, they can only do that for so long before their capacity to keep it on hand is going to run out. Of course, they're also going to run out of money. Now, the Treasury has also been busy seizing bank accounts and seizing cryptocurrency accounts. The Iranian accounts have been opened up in all of the partner nations in the region where they're known to exist. And so it's not going to be long, in my opinion, before things are going to come to a head and they're going to be forced to make a deal. President Trump is doing his typical hardball routine that he does with the art of the deal, and he is essentially going to get what he wants in the end. Lee Walden over on Rumble says, it's fine on my end, Zach. How the hell are you doing? I'm doing great, brother. You continue to impress us with your gift of current news and bring your passion and laughs when appropriate. Thanks, homie. I appreciate you, brother. You certainly are a real one. Thank you to Doogie Boston as well, who says it's Doug E. Boston. You knew I wasn't going to be able to say it right. Dougie Boston. Thank you, Zach. You got some great content. Thanks again, Patriot. I appreciate you, Dougie. Thank you, sir. Trump 1 says, happy Friday, Zach. I want to ask, since many say it's oil companies price gouging, if that's the case, why doesn't the Trump administration call them out? I don't fully understand why prices are so high. Well, I don't fully understand why prices are so high either. Price gouging has a very specific definition. And I think that what the oil companies do is they keep the price of oil, which is the price of gasoline that you're going to pay for at the pump, within a certain margin. And they know that if they go over a certain margin, then they're going to meet that definition of price gouging. But in the meantime, they also know that they can charge a certain amount, get away with it, and make as much money as they possibly can. So it's really a matter of semantics at this point. I would hope that the administration would have a conversation with the oil companies and say, there is no need for you guys to be bleeding out the American people. We're making all of these gains in other places. Essentially, you're getting the lion's share of that because of your greed. There is no need for those prices that we're seeing at the pumps. You go to some place like California, unfortunately, 40 or 50% of what you're paying is all going to taxes. So there's not much they can do there. Okay. Let's see. Now, just not. Okay. So Shadowban says, I hear you fine, just not the playback. Well, that's interesting. So other people said echo on the playback, now no echo. Well, I'm just going to continue to plug along and we'll see what happens. All right, listen, before we hit the next piece here, I do need to talk about the next sponsor of our program. That's going to be also my friends over there at Rumble and Rumble Wallet. You guys, I got a quick question for you. How much control do you actually have over your own money right now? Technology has changed everything, and now it's changing how money works. Crypto started out as a niche, but now it's pretty much mainstream. You get faster payments, more control, fewer middlemen. It's not hype. It's just where things are going. And getting started today is a lot easier than you might think. This is where the Rumble Wallet comes in. Because with Rumble Wallet, you can buy Bitcoin, you can hold dollar-backed stable coins, you can even own digital gold that is backed by real gold, and it's all in one place. Setup is super simple, too. It connects directly with MoonPay, so you can use your debit card, credit card, or bank account, and then you're up and running in just a couple of minutes. If you start small, it's very easy. $10, $50, $100. It's not really about the amount. It's basically just about getting in early, understanding what's coming next, getting comfortable using it. And then once you're all set up, you can even use that Rumble Wallet to tip people like me or other content creators that you believe in directly on the platform. And the best part is that the lion's share of that money is going to go to support the program. So you got to do this right now. Just scan that QR code that you see, or you can click the link in the description that you see on Rumble, or you can just go to the App Store for the device that you're using, Apple or Android. And then you're going to be able to download the Rumble Wallet. From there, you get everything set up. You just log in with your Rumble account. You tap buy, or you tap donate to the user that you see that is live. If you were to go to Rumble Wallet right now and you follow me on Rumble, you would see that I am live and you can donate right there. So take control of your own money. Get started with Rumble Wallet today. Thank you so much to them for continuing to support my program. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys. Now, continuing on with the next story. This is also in relation to President Trump. Now, apparently right now, he's down here in Florida. He's doing an event. And in the midst of this event, he started brutally trolling Ilhan Omar, teasing her about the fact that she is likely under criminal investigation right now. So let's go ahead and hear from POTUS.
But JD's done a great job. Thousands and thousands of people are, it's a fraud. I mean, look at the wonderful country. It's a beautiful country. You should try it sometime. Somalia, it's a beautiful place. It's got no government. It's got no military. It's got no anything. It's got one thing that's really strong, crime. It's got a lot of crime. They have no police. All they do is run around shooting each other. It's filthy dirty, disgusting dirty. It's a horrible place. They come here, and Ilhan Omar, you ever hear of her? She heads it. And think of it. They have.
The volume is up as high as I can go. I've got OBS cranked an extra 5 decibels. I've got Opera cranked an extra 4.5 decibels. This is turned up as high as it can. My soundboard is up. It is, unfortunately, a quiet bit of audio.
Nothing but crime, poverty, pollution. Everything is horrible over there. Nothing good. They say it's the worst country anywhere in the world, that we got some beauties out there, but it's the worst. And then she comes here from Somalia, and she tells us how to run the United States of America. She says, the Constitution gives me certain rights. And I demand that I be given these rights. Get the hell out. What a phony.
Get on with you.
And then she married a brother to come in. I don't know, you're not. But I would imagine they're looking at her. I have nothing to do with it. I would imagine. Of course I have nothing to do. I have nothing, but I believe she married her brother, which is totally illegal. Although it's a lovely couple, actually, but it's a little bit on the illegal side. Darling, I love you very much. Good night, brother. Let's go to bed. Isn't she despicable? I can't stand watching.
I just spit all over my desk.
I can't stand. Did you see last month? She accidentally checked the wrong box. It said she was worth $38 million. And law enforcement came after her for that. And then all of a sudden she was worth less than $80,000. And she said it was accounting. It was an accounting error.
Oh.
That was not a very good accountant, was it? Huh? No. Their whole life is based on fraud and a scam. The whole thing is a scam. And we ought to get those people the hell out of our country.
Please continue, POTUS. Oh my God, he's so good. He's so good every single time. I absolutely love it. Okay. Oh, my Lord. All right. So, yeah, I guess he's at the Villages right now, which is, of course, it's a big retirement community down here in Florida. Lee Walden also says, I've learned that fuel prices are controlled by brokers and insurance that never touch fuel, and it's a cabal. They charge around 10 to 15% above true cost. Can you say Lords of London? Well, I mean, it's not just them. Because the London Insurance Exchange is not covering oil that is going to be shipped in our region. It's going to be covering everything going through the Straits of Hormuz, which is now, of course, being insured by the government of the United States once everything gets reopened. But I mean, markups are going to be on everything. So you've got the transporters, you've got the oil companies who pump it, you've got the refiners. I mean, every step along the way, somebody is getting a markup. So, like, if we were just pumping our own crude oil and then refining it ourselves, we would be paying, obviously, a lot less for that energy. But there are just so many people with their fingers all along the way. And so I am willing to bet that every step of the way, somebody is getting an extra cut on top of what they're already doing because they know that there is anxiety. Tricia says, yeah, that tax preparer needs to be audited. I certainly hope so. Lee also says, remember the movie Deliverance, Dueling Banjos. Anytime we talk about Omar, you can ring that dueling banjos. Yes, sir. Sir Lurks-a-Lot, thank you for the fleet, my friend. Also, Trump1 says, thank you for your explanation, Zach. I know it's temporary. Yes, that is, everything is transitory. Everything is temporary. And hopefully we can get through this and we will move on to a much, much better state of existence for all of us. All right. Thank you, President Trump. Continue to troll Ilhan Omar, and let's see about actually getting her deported. All right. Now, stepping up with regards to the recent Supreme Court decision, which is now affecting the Voting Rights Act in congressional districts all over the country, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry has officially suspended those House primaries. Now, first, we learned that this was likely to happen. Now there has been an official announcement coming from Governor Landry. They had a primary election that was going to be coming up very shortly on May 16th. So now those primaries are going to be held back until July. This is so that the Louisiana State House can draw those new congressional districts. Now, Landry said the rescheduling will only impact the House races in the state and subsequent runoff elections, meaning the Senate and the state Supreme Court races are actually going ahead as planned on May 16th. So technically, they will be having multiple primaries. Now, the reason this is necessary is because Louisiana redrew their maps back in 2024. There was, at that time, a decision from a lower court that ruled previous maps likely violated the Voting Rights Act because they did not include a second majority black district. So now that the Supreme Court has ruled that you can't do it either way, you can't exclude blacks and you can't draw it explicitly for blacks, and not just blacks, but people of all colors. Any race-based considerations are outside of the boundaries of the Constitution. So he said the best way to end race-based discrimination is to stop making decisions based on race. Here in Louisiana, we're proud to lead the nation on this charge. Allowing elections to proceed under an unconstitutional map would undermine the integrity of our system and violate the rights of our voters. This executive order ensures we uphold the rule of law while giving the legislature the time it needs to pass a fair and lawful congressional map. The House races will now be suspended until July 15th or until such a time as determined by the state legislature. It was not immediately clear when the runoffs from the primary would take place. I'm sure that they will go ahead and get that figured out as well. But what's really great about this is that after Louisiana stepped up, a number of other states also stepped up to do the exact same thing. Now, today we got an announcement from Governor Kay Ivey of Alabama that they also are officially calling a special session, which will also redraw Alabama's congressional maps. I predicted the other day when this decision was handed down by the SCOTUS that likely we were at a minimum going to see a wholesale redrawing of congressional districts all across the Southeast. But it's not going to stop there. Let me just read this announcement from Governor Ivey. Whereas an extraordinary occasion exists in the state of Alabama, which requires the legislature to convene in special session, now therefore I, Kay Ivey, as governor of the state of Alabama, do hereby proclaim and direct the legislature of the state of Alabama shall convene in special session in the Alabama State House in Montgomery at 4 p.m. on Monday, May 4th, to take up the following specifically described subject or matter. Primary elections. Legislature may consider legislation to provide for a special primary election for electing members of the United States House of Representatives and the Alabama State Senate in districts whose boundary lines are altered by a court issuing a judgment, vacating an injunction, or otherwise ordering or permitting an alteration in the boundaries of such districts. Again, all related to race-based district coordination. All other legislation beyond the legislation specifically described above is expressly excluded, which means that they can only work on this one thing. So there won't be any way for people to come in and essentially, push it from happening right then. It needs to happen right now, and it will. So we now have two confirmed states, Louisiana and Alabama. But wait, there's more. Because Governor Henry McMaster, who is currently the 117th governor of South Carolina, has also stepped forward to say that the U.S. Supreme Court upheld South Carolina's current congressional map in 2024, but in light of the court's most recent decision on the Voting Rights Act, it would be appropriate for the General Assembly to ensure that South Carolina's congressional map still complies with all requirements of federal law and the U.S. Constitution. So it would appear that we are also going to have a redrawing of congressional districts in the state of South Carolina as well. But wait, there's more, because the Justice Department and our gal Harmeet Dillon has just announced that they are going to be using the latest decision from the Supreme Court of the United States to ensure that racial gerrymandered districts throughout the entire country are now also going to be redrawn. So this commitment comes as we have 45 redistricting disputes that currently remain unsolved in both federal and state courts. So there is a bit of a cloud of uncertainty over the current makeup and the future makeup of the U.S. House of Representatives as it would exist in November. So the United States Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, says that the Justice Department is now going to be enforcing the Supreme Court's decision on gerrymandering districts in every state that has such a district. And wouldn't you bet, Harmeet Dillon has already had people working on this for some time. They know exactly which states have such racially gerrymandered districts. So in case you missed the initial announcement, what happened on Monday was that the Supreme Court struck down 2 prior congressional maps in Louisiana. I'm sorry, Wednesday, not Monday. So the ruling was that the state was unconstitutionally racially gerrymandering when it added that second majority black district, even though, as stated by the governor of Louisiana, that was an order from a lower court. So they redrew that map in 2024 after that previous ruling. They said at that time it violated the Voting Rights Act because it did not include such a district. But now, of course, it is considered to be unconstitutional. So they got to go back to the drawing board. Missouri GOP Senator Eric Schmidt has asked the Justice Department yesterday to enforce that Supreme Court ruling nationwide, saying, you guys have the power to do so. There is currently a bunch of unconstitutional districts all around the country. We really should take care of this as quickly as possible. So Harmeet Dillon replied almost immediately, Senator, we are on it. The Justice Department, under Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, continues to prioritize equal protection of the law for all Americans, be it in employment, housing, education, and voting. So we are still looking at decisions to be coming down in regards to those 45 redistricting disputes. I'm interested to see how this decision by the Supreme Court is going to be applied in all of those instances. But at the end of the day, this is very, very good news because it means that across all 50 states, we are going to have redrawn districts and redrawn boundaries. And most importantly, in California, where they just put a new congressional map out there, they intentionally, explicitly, and openly drew a number of those districts based upon certain racial metrics. So California's new congressional district is not going to stand. Very, very good news. Let me say thank you to Principled Enigma, my friend. He says, kudos to what you do, bro, and thanks for playing that Trump clip. POTUS is the best. So are you, Zach. Keep it up. Thank you, Principled Enigma. I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you also to PM Tetri 66. Best news out there, and I really respect that you spit all over your desk. Sometimes you just can't help it. I'm just having so much fun reporting on this stuff. Thank you both. I really appreciate you. All right. We also have great news coming out of the state of Michigan. This is a case that's been ongoing for quite some time. And as you know, me being a former resident of Michigan, a lot of the election shenanigans that were taking place there were directly relevant to me and my situation. And it kind of just got to the point, especially after the 2020 election, where I said to Lisa, you know what? I'm done. We should just move to Florida. I think that's where my heart lies. I'd really like to get out of this state because it feels like I'm spinning my wheels. I'm not really doing anything to change the way things work around here. And for many years, the leftist government of Michigan, which would be Dana Nessel and Jocelyn Benson and Governor Gretchen Whitmer, they have been tearing that state apart, driving it into the ground. But Attorney General Dana Nessel, as the top law enforcement officer of that state, has probably done more than anybody else. And she has personally waged a vicious lawfare campaign against anyone who might be brave enough to question the results of the 2020 election. One of the targets of Dana Nessel's ire was Stephanie Scott. Stephanie Scott is now the former Adams Township clerk. That's out of Hillsdale County. So Stephanie was doing exactly what a lot of people demanded. She was simply examining voter records and the data from the elections to ensure whether or not what we were being told was true. Was the elections secure? Were they secure? Was there integrity? No, people have integrity. Elections can't have integrity, but elections can be secure. They can be free and fair or fake and gay. Now, the saga began when Adams Township clerk Stephanie Scott, who is a Republican, she ran for office specifically campaigning to protect election integrity. She became the target of Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson Why? Because much like Tina Peters, she refused to allow updates to her township's Hart voting machine. Now, Stephanie was concerned that this so-called update would compromise, or even worse, it might just erase critical 2020 election data. Now, the reason that's a problem, just like in Colorado, both Michigan and federal law require that election data to be preserved for 22 months. Now, Stephanie should be praised for the courage that she showed in standing up to Jocelyn Benson and the state government machine in Michigan, because all she was doing was what she was elected to do. It was her sworn duty to protect the integrity and the chain of custody for the election equipment that was entrusted to be put into her care, and that the people elected her to keep that stuff safe. But on October 25th of 2021, Stephanie received a threatening letter from Jocelyn Benson's office, and it was written by another character from Michigan that we have talked about so many times it makes me sick, Director of Elections Jonathan Brader. Now, Jonathan, when he wrote that letter to Stephanie from Jocelyn Benson's office, he also forwarded a copy to Dana Nessel's office, clearly intending to intimidate Stephanie and, if possible, get her indicted. Now, that letter informed her that she was being relieved of her duties as an elected official. They were firing her, even though the people of Hillsdale County had elected her. That letter also informed her that not only was she being removed, but if she did not comply with demands to update the tabulator, she would get into even more trouble. Now, this letter arrived actually a full 2 days before that arbitrary deadline, and it was going to be Stephanie's intention from the get-go to not do the update. She pushed back, and she actually wrote to Jonathan Brader, and she said, that deadline for the public accuracy test and potential reprogramming of the machine is still 2 days away. It was my understanding via an email from the deputy county clerk that the machine maintenance is actually not due until the end of the calendar year. The Hillsdale County clerk set this arbitrary August 2021 date for machine maintenance, of which I did not participate. Now, she also had some questions about maybe why were the modems plugged in and on all day during the elections if the only reasons the modems exist is to transmit results after the polls closed. I think it's a question that deserves answering. It certainly deserved answering back then. So this letter directed Stephanie to provide immediate access to all election equipment and records, which included the tabulator, the voter assist terminals, absentee ballot applications, ballot envelopes, and polling place materials. And it also warned her she was no longer going to have access to the qualified voter file. That was going to be suspended until further notice, and that she was going to be charged with a misdemeanor if she refused to comply. So what did Governor Whitmer, Jocelyn Benson, and Dana Nessel do? They went in hard to try to intimidate Stephanie. They sent the Michigan State Police, and they executed a search warrant on Adams Township Hall, and they seized everything, all of Stephanie Scott's computers, all of her equipment. And of course, because it's Michigan and they're run by the most radical leftist talking mouthpieces of the deep state, the media and these left-wing activists immediately demonized her. They went after her online. They smeared her as some kind of dangerous criminal. They attacked her in the media. All Stephanie ever wanted to do was verify the accuracy of the 2020 election in her township. And of course, she wanted to comply with both federal and state law. But they were successful in getting her removed from her position. She was ultimately recalled from her elected position as a clerk, and it was all because she asked questions, and the state government of Michigan didn't want to answer those questions. But it got even worse, because during that preliminary investigation and examination, Michigan Bureau of Elections Director Jonathan Brader was actually caught lying under oath. He was under some pretty intense cross-examination, and during that cross-examination, he actually contradicted statements he had previously made to the grand jury, and he ultimately admitted that his directive from December of 2020, which ordered clerks to delete data from that 2020 electronic poll book, he admitted it was unlawful. He also admitted the order had not undergone proper rulemaking procedures. It was completely outside of the boundaries of the law. Now, if Brader had testified consistently, like admitting to the unlawful nature of this order when he testified to the grand jury, I think it's pretty likely that Stephanie never would have had an indictment returned against her. But it's even worse when you look at the indictment itself and the language that they used. The good news is that a judge in Hillsdale County, Circuit Court Judge Sarah S. Lizzani, delivered a decisive victory for Stephanie and her attorney, Stephanie Lambert, and basically had all of the charges struck and removed. She completely dismissed all of the felony charges that were made against Stephanie Scott and her former attorney, Stephanie Lambert. Now, you might remember Stephanie Lambert because she was working with the sheriff in Michigan, Dar Leaf, who had for many years been trying to raise awareness with the federal government about the presence of foreign nationals within Dominion that had access to our election equipment and materials. So the felony charges they tried to go after Stephanie and Stephanie for: computer unauthorized access, conspiracy to commit computers unauthorized access, and using a computer to commit a crime. It was all based on a inaccurate interpretation of a Michigan statute, MCL 168.509GG1. Now, this statute lists that certain voter registration information is exempt from FOIA disclosure. When the judge made this ruling, she totally eviscerated the lower court's bind-over decision, and she ruled that it was a clear error of law and an outright abuse of discretion. Here's why. In her analysis, she said this statute does not contain additional information such as or otherwise. Confidentiality is not imposed by the statute, and the term confidential is not even written in this section. By finding that there was a basis to bind over the felony charges against both defendants, the Hillsdale District Court made the finding that the statute had a confidentiality requirement. However, this court finds that that was an error of law, and by definition, it abused its discretion. So the judge really hammered home the fact that the legislature deliberately chose not to impose broad confidentiality requirements in subsection 1, which is the subsection that Stephanie and Stephanie were charged under. However, other subsections of the same statute that use explicit language like must not be used or released for any other purpose or confidential exist. It just doesn't exist under what Stephanie was charged with. So because all of the felony charges hinged on a non-existent confidentiality duty, there was actually never any probable cause for any of these so-called computer-related felonies. So thank God, all 3 felony counts against both women were quashed, completely thrown out. There is a single remaining misdemeanor charge against Stephanie Scott that was remanded back to the district court, but that is rather low level, and it's not like she's going to go to prison for it like she might have with these other felonies. So her defense attorney, David Kalman, who she represented Scott, but Stephanie Lambert represented herself pro se, did a really great job fighting against this overzealous prosecution. And certainly these women won as a result of his expert analysis and efforts in defending them. So David put out a press release and shared it shortly after the victory. This ruling is a complete vindication for our client, who from day one maintained that she acted legally and in good faith. The court recognized what we have argued all along. There was never any criminal statute applicable to her proper and legal actions, and therefore no crime was committed. Township officials cannot be prosecuted for hiring legal counsel and experts to assist them in carrying out their lawful duties under the law. I am grateful that Judge Lizzani followed the law and dismissed all of these felony charges against me, Stephanie Scott said. Now, just like last year's alternate electors case that David also won on behalf of Hank Choate, this case should never have been brought. Our client is a local public official trying to carry out her lawful duties, and the Attorney General weaponized criminal statutes against her in a manner never used in the history of the state of Michigan. As a result, she was subjected to 2 years of unwarranted legal jeopardy, and today's decision restores her reputation and reaffirms the rule of law. Now, I don't know if Stephanie is going to have any sort of recourse against the state of Michigan. This seems like pretty obviously a type of, unlawful action that was taken by the state. They completely made something up charged her with felonies. And I think that ultimately what they were hoping was going to happen is that she was going to look at this seemingly overwhelming power of the state coming down on her, and she just would have pled to something lower, and then they would have been able to use that against her, pointing to yet another so-called election denier that the state of Michigan is keeping you safe from. So Stephanie Scott was acting lawfully the entire time, and the only people in my book who are criminals are the state government of Michigan. You can also throw in there the media. You can throw in there the state police, anybody who acted with malice against Stephanie and Stephanie. How dare you hire a lawyer to help you do your job? How dare you try to follow state and federal laws when it comes to the retention of election-related equipment? So I'm sure that the radical leftists in the state of Michigan are probably losing their shit over this, and that is a good thing. Oh, thank you so much to Tron Anon for raiding the stream. Appreciate you, buddy. See that over on Rumble. That's interesting. They throw it up there now like it's a Rumble rant, so that's pretty cool. Let's see. Also, thank you very much to Principled Enigma, who also says, I know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to moving from somewhere. Therefore, I am happy to announce that I am extremely from Pennsylvania. Thank you also to Principled Enigma. I know this is kind of a crazy time for me to ask, but do you get all of the money that we pay you from these rants? So there is a small percentage of the rants. I think it's like 20% that goes to Rumble. If you want basically all of it to go to me, then you can use Rumble Wallet. But you can also go to ko-fi.com/redpill78. Of course, there's also a processing fee that comes out of that. It is slightly less than what gets taken from Rumble. You can also do Cash App, $ZakPaine. There's really no way to donate to the show that somebody doesn't take something off the top. The purest way to do it is actually a Rumble wallet, which is, pretty cool. But either way, I appreciate however you guys want to support me. Let me see. Thank you so much over here on Pilled as well. Sean Joe, thank you for the can. Super D, thank you for the can. Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie. Mayatua, thank you for the cookie. And Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie. Also, over on Rumble, Makes Sense to Me Too says, speeding from beginning. Sorry, I read that since oil is a global commodity, everyone except China apparently pays the same price no matter where you get it. So I think that you would be imagining like the oil companies. The oil companies are probably paying the same price. But then, of course, you're going to, if it's going through the Strait of Hormuz, I'm sure that there's going to be additional duties and fees. There's going to be hazard pay. I'm only really concerned about what we pay for it. But also there is a difference in terms of, how much the oil companies are paying a refiner, how much they're paying the crews that are getting it out of the ground. You're definitely going to have some differences with that as well. But yeah, there is like the commodity price for a barrel of crude oil that, people are going to have as the set price. But there's a lot of other things that come into play all over it. All right. Thank you very much for that support, you guys. Appreciate you. All right. So moving on from that, also have another update from my good friend Andrew Paquette at Zark Files, also known as Art Zark. So remember those signatures we were taking a look at yesterday? Art put it out there that these files were taken from the files that he got from New York. And using this analysis, he has determined that there are 1.5 million cloned voters and duplicated signatures. That's in one state, the state of New York. Every single line that they tested to get to these numbers shows that these signatures match perfectly. 1.5 million voters is obviously more than enough to swing any election. So he continues to do his work looking into elections all around the country. He's also just developed a game to sort of make the subject of election fraud perhaps, I guess, a little sexier, getting it on people's minds. And, of course, there is nothing it's not a game, election fraud, but when you put something like this into people's minds, it gives them a better understanding of how the fraud is taking place. So let me go ahead and play this video from Andrew.
Hello, I am Dr. Zark. Elections consist of the following three elements: voters, candidates, and ballots. Voters are too numerous to govern effectively. This is why they need dedicated representatives. Candidates are nominated to give voters a choice of who will represent their interests. Secret ballots allow voters to express their choices without fear of retribution. Now, after years of scientific study, Dr. Zark has discovered that it is possible to conduct elections without voters or candidates. That's right, ballots only. Dr. Zark's selection game shows how this can work. Instead of voting for candidates, you play to destroy your opponent's votes while multiplying your own. It's almost like real life. Give it a try and learn. Dr. Zark's selection game, the way it might already be.
Anyways, I just thought that was pretty cool. Help people understand exactly how they are stealing elections from us all around the country. All right, now, we also have news coming from the Department of Justice. A lawsuit or a claim has been filed against New Jersey because you may not know this, but they have laws that provide in-state tuition and financial assistance to illegal aliens. Now, by nature of these laws, the state of New Jersey is discriminating against U.S. citizens because they're not granted the same tuition rates. They're not given the same scholarships. They're obviously not being subsidized in the same way. And it's the assertion of the Department of Justice that this is unconstitutional, which it clearly is. Imagine being denied the opportunity of education in your own country. By granting illegal aliens in-state tuition, the state of New Jersey is doing just that. That's from Associate Attorney General Stanley Woodward. Now, the Assistant Attorney General Brett A. Shoemate of the Justice Department's Civil Division said that the agency will not tolerate U.S. citizens who are being treated like second-class citizens in their own country. This is a simple matter of federal law. In New Jersey and nationwide, colleges cannot provide benefits to illegal aliens that they do not provide to U.S. citizens. But the fact of the matter is, it's not only happening in New Jersey. This is merely the place where they are beginning. All right. Now, thank you to Shanjo for the cookie. All right. Now, this is, again, something that I hate to report on, but I think it's so vitally important because it's happening all around this nation. Another Biden-appointed judge has just released an illegal alien. This is not just any illegal alien. This is not some guy who is, trying to live his life with his family. This is a guy who's wanted for murder. This is a guy who's got an Interpol red notice. This is a man who is an international fugitive, and ICE had him in their possession. But this Biden-appointed federal judge in Rhode Island has ordered that this Dominican illegal alien be released, despite the fact there's an Interpol red notice for murder. They want him in his home country because he is a killer. This criminal illegal alien is named Brian Rafael Gomez. So he was arrested by ICE in Boston, and he's been in their possession since April 4th. So he had just been picked up locally for domestic abuse. When he got arrested, there was a background check that showed he was a Dominican citizen. He was in the United States illegally. Authorities in Dominican Republic had issued a criminal arrest warrant for homicide for him, and that's been since 2023. So for the last three years, this internationally wanted killer has been roaming around the United States, doing God knows what. And of course, he came here and he starts beating up on women. And because he is wanted for murder, he's the subject of an active Interpol red notice. This is what they call an international arrest warrant for murder. So Gomez gets detained. He's at an ICE facility in Rhode Island. An immigration judge issues a deportation order on April 28th. But then on Tuesday, you've got District Judge Melissa Dubose who steps in. She's a Biden appointee. She was confirmed in 2024 as the first Black and openly LGBTQ federal judge in Rhode Island. She's also incredibly stupid. Now, immigration courts exist for one reason and one reason only: to govern the legal situation surrounding aliens in the United States of America. But this brain-dead federal court judge steps in and says that The United States government and ICE must release him on the grounds of continuous unlawful detention. So ICE, of course, argued that Gomez is subject to mandatory detention because there's an international warrant for murder on his ass. And the judge just ignored it and said, no, I want him to go free. So Bill Malugin wrote on Twitter, I'm told by federal sources that a Dominican illegal alien with a deportation order and an Interpol Red Notice arrest warrant for murder in his home country was ordered released from ICE custody on Tuesday by a Rhode Island federal judge, Melissa Dubose. I'm told that international fugitive Brian Rafael Gomez was arrested by ICE in Boston, and he was issued a deportation order. And then after that, Judge Dubose steps in, wants him released from ICE custody, calls it continuous unlawful detention. ICE argued that Gomez is not a good man. It's not safe to put him out on the streets again. And so now, as a result of her order, Gomez is released. He's now wandering free again, and they have no idea where he is. He was caught and released at the southern border by the Biden administration back in 2022. So now, the people of Rhode Island, the people of the northeastern part of the United States, they have yet another criminal illegal alien, a murderer, wandering around the streets. Could be in Massachusetts, could be in Rhode Island, could be in Connecticut, for all we know. I don't know. Maybe he's going to stay with Judge Dubose. But I cannot, for the life of me, understand how this keeps happening. This is so clearly a bad idea. I feel like if there is ever going to be an opportunity for judges to be dismissed, to be disbarred, to be impeached, like this has got to happen. They need to do this. KNAKAZ808 says, aloha, have a great weekend. Thank you, sir. Good to see you, buddy. I appreciate you. When are they going to do this? When are they going to step up and start giving these judges the boot? It needs to happen because as it stands right now, all we're going to see is more death, more destruction, more murder, more drunken driving, more dead kids. There's no good outcome to any of this stuff. Principled Enigma says, to all those people who give a thumbs down to Zak's presentations, read scripture without consulting any denomination helps. Then enjoy the ride up the IQ ladder. Thank you for that, sir. Yeah, I don't know who stops in to give me a thumbs down, but it happens. It's okay. I'm okay with it. The overwhelming majority of people enjoy the show. But if you are not somebody, if you're somebody who's watching and has not hit like, you can do that. It will overcome any negative impact of a person who just doesn't like me for whatever reason. All right. We are going to be transitioning to our conversation about James Bryan Comey now. But it's not just James Comey. We're also still talking about Eric Ciaramella, that fake whistleblower who essentially started the Ukraine impeachment hoax. Now, Paul Sperry, he's got some long-standing connections in Washington, D.C., and he's speaking with a federal prosecutor who is familiar with the grand conspiracy case. Now, I have said on a number of occasions, Eric Ciaramella, by virtue of his placement within this fake whistleblower saga, is certainly considered a person of interest with regard to this grand conspiracy. And it's not just for that reason, because apparently this prosecutor says that Eric Ciaramella is under careful consideration for his role years earlier in the manufacturing of fake U.S. intelligence about Putin and Trump, which would be the Obama-ordered ICA. That was the initial intelligence product that John Brennan swore up and down before Congress was not part of the rationale to investigate Donald Trump. But Eric Ciaramella at that time was an Obama White House analyst working on Russia and Ukraine. And apparently he was also part of that effort to create the fake ICA and use it as the predicate to open all of the crossfires and the various investigations into President Trump and the people around him. So Eric Ciaramella, I know that he has been subpoenaed to testify in the grand conspiracy grand jury. And I swear to God, I hope, pray every single day he is one of those people that's going to be indicted. Lynn Muffin is doing well. She is currently with her mother, having a nap. All right. Before we dive into the rest of the Comey information, I do have a piece of new information coming from my good friends over here on Rumble. All right. If you're looking for some entertainment that tickles the brain, tickles the funny bone, maybe even tickles the prostate, you've got to check out Slaughterama and Adonis Paul's High Rollers. Join intergalactic crack dealer Sleazy P. Martini and cartoon casino owner Adonis Paul for the only trivia experience you don't just watch. You actually play live in chat and appear live on screen. You even write your own trivia topics for the show. The first week of May is Epstein Week, and this is where you can test your knowledge on the worst things imaginable, or you might be able to stump the hosts and the guests with your own topic. You can play strategically, you can bet your winnings, and you can lord your power over the chat. So you can search for Sleazy P. Martini and Late Night with Adonis Paul on Rumble and bookmark it now. You can watch the show Mondays and Fridays at 10 p.m. Eastern for Slaughterama and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern for Adonis Paul High Rollers. Don't wait to subscribe. It's only a matter of time until we get canceled for having too much fun. Don't miss out. Sleazy P. Martini was the manager of GWAR. If you guys listen to GWAR, if you're in my age bracket, you might have listened to GWAR when you were younger. And I actually had him on the show a couple of years ago, and he has invited me to come on that game show, and it's just never lined up with my schedule. But I'm going to make sure that I make it happen now. Thank you, Sleazy. Appreciate you, buddy. All right, let us jump back into this breakdown of the Comey memos. Now, this is coming from Sundance over at The Last Refuge. Sundance, in my opinion, has always been a great source of analysis and commentary. He's got a lot of connections. He's been following this deeply since the very beginning. Now, what was most interesting to me is James Comey's presence in the midst of the grand conspiracy. And now that we have a new investigation looking into Comey for the release of classified information, as I hinted in the title of this broadcast today, I think that this is going to ultimately lead us down a couple of different rabbit holes and pull in additional people who were always part of the grand conspiracy. But in this instance, the investigation into James Comey's memos and his release of them to the New York Times through his legal proxy, Daniel Richman, is going to show us how the appointment of Robert Mueller as special counsel was always part of this coordinated, ongoing conspiracy to take down President Trump. So Sundance has laid out a timeline for us. We're going to go back to June of 2017. At that time, CNN and a bunch of other media outlets filed a FOIA suit to gain access to these Comey memos. Now, the lawsuit itself went through a pretty lengthy legal battle because the Mueller team didn't want to turn any of those memos over. And the lead FBI agent for Mueller's team was a guy by the name of David Archie. David Archie went on record. He made a number of sworn declarations to the court. And it's important because those statements became known as the Archie declarations. Inside of David Archie's declarations, this agent provided a specific outline of the FBI and these memos, which came to be known as the Comey memos. So we have two sets of documents that outline a very specific picture for us. You've got Robert Archie's lead FBI agent, David Archie, making these sworn declarations to the court. But at the time of his sworn statement, David Archie did not have knowledge of an inside FBI whistleblower who had provided information to the DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz. So that means that the information that David Archie was giving to these sworn declarations in the course of the Mueller investigation, they came head to head and they conflict with other information that had already been given. Okay. Also, thank you to Siesta Randy for donating Looks like I thought maybe it was a Rumble wallet. No, it's just regular. He says, another great week of shows, Zach. Let's all help my darling Sherry and the Jenkins family on Give, Send, Go. Yes, Lisa has, I believe Lisa shared the link out earlier. And again, congratulations on your impending pregnancy. Hopefully you guys are in a new house before the baby comes. All right, so you've got this distinct conflict that arises with the Horowitz report, which was on James Comey and the memos, and the David Archie declarations, which were given in the course of his testimony. But beyond that conflict, you've also got an even more alarming picture of exactly how it was that Robert Mueller was even deployed. And the information is laid out in this timeline that we're going to take a look at today. The picture is pretty clear. I think everybody has always assumed that the insertion of Mueller into all of these various investigations against Donald Trump, I mean, it was done by the same people. But David Archie stated that the investigative team came into full possession of the Comey memos on or about May 12th of 2017. And we have this in documents that have been released by the United States government. Now, who was that investigative team? Well, it's a who's who of deep state agents. Andrew McCabe, Bill Priestap, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and then, of course, James Baker, who was the lead counsel for the group. The director's staff, as referenced in this document related to the Archie declarations, would be James Rybicki, another name I'm sure you've heard before, who was also identified by David Archie as having maintained possession of the memos. So James Rybicki is the guy who is supposed to have them the entire time. Added Up actually has donated on Rumble Wallet, donated Tether Gold. Thank you for that, Added Up. I appreciate you, homie. All right, so this very small group of people, which basically were Comey's chief of staff, James Rybicki, and then all these other people that he used to work with when he was at the FBI. You've got Rybicki at the center of the team, and this team is confirmed to exist in the Horowitz report. And they had this set of memos on May 12th of 2017. But when we move to the aspect of this story where these motives and ideology become really clear is when we examine the Inspector General's custodial record of the memos. And this is outlined in the supervisory special agent in charge of Comey's documents within the IG report. And this is where it differs from the Archie declarations. So that FBI supervisory special agent, we will say SSA, who's in charge of the Comey document retrieval, is this so-called whistleblower who eventually went to the Inspector General. And we'll explain how this understanding is a little bit easier to examine when we describe them. It turns out that on May 10th, the Comey memos were not in Comey's office. If you'll remember, Comey had said that they were in a safe, and he was leery about giving them over, part of his Boy Scout persona. But there was a search and review of Comey's office, and when they searched his office, there were no hard copies of these memos that were discovered by the whistleblower, the supervisory special agent. And we can see that right here. FBI efforts to secure information and devices from Comey's office and home. On May 10th, 2017, the morning after Comey was removed, a supervisory special agent was appointed to secure and inventory Comey's office. The SSA told the OIG he confirmed to the office that he had not accessed by Comey or anybody else after Comey's removal, and therefore he positioned himself so that no one from the inventory team could leave the office with any items that didn't come past him. The SSA told the OIG that every item that came out of the office went onto an inventory sheet. At that time, the SSA conducted the inventory. He was not aware that Comey had drafted the memos, and according to the inventory, no hard copies of any of the memos were found in Comey's office. Now, again, on May 12th, by May 12th, James Rybicki had all the Comey memos in his possession, and that was confirmed by Mueller team FBI agent David Archie. So on May 12th, the supervisory special agent whistleblower went to James Comey's house along with James Rybicki and the deputy FBI director David Bowditch. And during this visit on May 12th, James Comey never said to the SSA whistleblower that he had the memos in his personal safe. James Rybicki was also present for the retrieval visit, and he was also never told by anybody that he was holding the memos in his FBI office. So on May 15th, 3 days later, James Rybicki tells that whistleblower that he knows the location of the memos, and Rybicki informs the whistleblower that he has additional relevant material. So on May 15th, Comey's chief of staff informs the whistleblower of the existence of the Comey memos. According to notes maintained by the SSA in charge of inventorying Comey's records on May 15th, Rybicki notified the SSA that there were additional documents belonging to Comey stored in the reception area near the former director's desk, in desk drawer safes belonging to Comey's executive assistant in Rybicki's office. These documents were collected into 2 boxes and, among other things, contained 6 of the original memos. The SSA's notes reflect that Rybicki also told the SSA about a 7th document, Memo 5, that Comey had sent to Rybicki on March 1st via the FBI's unclassified email system, and Rybicki provided the SSA with a copy of that email. So, from the OIG report, Rybicki tells the SSA he did not tell anyone about the memos during the May 10th inventory because he understood that process to only include Comey's office. If he had these memos in his possession, by all rights, knowing that there was an inventory of Comey's documents going on, attempting to secure all potentially classified information, he should have made this supervisory special agent aware of it. The fact that he didn't indicates that he was hiding the fact that these memos existed at that time. So at this point, the SSA whistleblower begins to suspect that something sketchy is happening. And then on the following day, May 16th, Comey sends this memo content to his friend, his lawyer, Daniel Richman, with the instructions to leak these memos to the New York Times. And they were published at 5 p.m. on May 16th, 2017. So if Rybicki did not inform that SSA whistleblower on May 15th about the memos, then the SSA whistleblower would have found out about these memos from the leaked media reports the next day. And if Rybicki did not tell the SSA whistleblower about the memos on the 15th, then it would have looked like the small group, which is that group of people Comey used to work with, was hiding and then leaking the memos. So when you honestly look at this, considering that Rybicki totally was hiding the memos, and it leads to the conclusion that Rybicki knew what was coming in the New York Times, Rybicki and this small group of people were coordinating with James Comey, and Rybicki and Comey were trying to avoid any scrutiny before the stuff came out, and then it was too late to put a lid on it. And you've also got more evidence of this when we get to the Mueller timeline. So on May 16th, that whistleblower, seeing how this is all unfolding, realizes that somebody has given this information to the New York Times. He goes to the OIG and he makes this report. Shortly after Comey's removal, a set of 7 memos was provided to the OIG by a department employee who claimed whistleblower status. This individual viewed the memos as extremely sensitive documents and was concerned that there should be a separate set deposited somewhere for safekeeping. The OIG handled and stored all 7 memos consistent with the requirements for classified information, even though only one memo had any classification markings at that time. So if you overlay the FBI small group contact, the contact they had not only with Comey but with Robert Mueller, it looks even more damning. So in terms of Crossfire Hurricane, during 2016, after the November election, and throughout the transition period into 2017, we have the FBI's counterintelligence investigation ongoing into Donald Trump. And during this time, FBI Director James Comey's memos were part of that exact same time period. They were contemporaneous to Crossfire Hurricane. So the FBI is gathering evidence. They're investigating President Trump. They're trying to get anything they can to take him down. But then James Comey gets fired, and it throws a monkey wrench into the whole thing. Tuesday, May 9th, James Comey is fired at approximately 5 p.m. Later, we discover that Rod Rosenstein first contacted Robert Mueller about a special counsel appointment less than 15 hours after James Comey gets fired. The next day, on Wednesday, May 10th, We know from congressional testimony that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein called Robert Mueller to discuss the special counsel appointment on May 10th at 7:45 a.m., basically as soon as he gets to work. And according to his own admissions and interviews that he did with other media outlets, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe immediately began a criminal obstruction investigation. On Wednesday, May 10th, he immediately enlists Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein with that obstruction investigation. So a few hours after the Rosenstein-Mueller phone call, James Comey's office is getting searched by the SSA, and they're looking for these documents. On Thursday, May 11th, Andrew McCabe testifies to Congress, and because Comey was just fired, all of this is fresh in the headlines. Mueller testified that there had been no effort to impede an FBI investigation, essentially exonerating President Trump. And also on Thursday, May 11th, the New York Times prints an article based on information which probably was leaked by James Comey about this dinner conversation between the president and the FBI director. This was that so-called ask for loyalty. And the IG report shows that Daniel Richman confirmed to the OIG that he was one of the sources for the May 11th article, although he said he was not the source of the information in the article about this Trump Tower briefing. And then on Friday, May 12th, Andrew McCabe once again meets with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to discuss the ongoing issues with the investigation and James Comey's firing, and they reference the so-called criminal obstruction case that McCabe opened just 2 days before. Rosenstein asked for my thoughts about whether we needed a special counsel to oversee the Russia case. I said I thought it would help the investigation's credibility, and later that day I went to see Rosenstein again, and here's the gist of what I said. I feel strongly that the investigation would be best served by having a special counsel. So according to Andy Biggs questioning Mueller on this same day, May 12th, we've got evidence that shows Robert Mueller met in person with Rod Rosenstein, which is also the same day the SSA whistleblower went to James Comey's house to retrieve FBI material, and both Rybicki and Comey never informed this agent about the memos when he is actively in the process of seeking anything that should be taken from Comey. So May 12th is the date noted by David Archie when FBI investigators assembled all of those Comey memos as evidence, but strangely, no one in the FBI outside of that small group of people who were working directly with James Comey knew anything about them. On Saturday, May 13th, you've got another meeting between Rosenstein and Mueller. This time, Jeff Sessions is involved. On Sunday, May 14th, Comey transmits copies of Memos 2, 4, and 6, and then he also sends out a partially redacted copy of Memo 7, this time to Patrick Fitzgerald. Patrick Fitzgerald was one of Comey's personal attorneys. Fitzgerald receives the email and PDF attachments from James Comey at 2:27 p.m. on May 14th. That is from the IG report. And then on Monday, May 15th, McCabe states he and Rosenstein conferred again about a special counsel. McCabe said, I brought the matter up to him after the weekend. And on that same day, Rybicki calls the SSA whistleblower to notify him about the Comey memos. And the memos were stored allegedly in some reception area in a locked drawer in Rybicki's office. But all of that's bullshit because he had the memos previously given to him by James Comey. On Tuesday, May 16th, on the morning of May 16th, Comey took digital photographs of both pages of Memo 4 using his personal cell phone. Then he sent those photographs via text message to Daniel Richman, the original leaker. And on the same day, Rod Rosenstein takes Mueller to the White House for a meeting in the Oval Office between Trump, Pence, Mueller, and Rosenstein. And while they're there meeting in the Oval Office, the story from the New York Times, based on the Comey memo leaks, is released. While Rosenstein, Mueller, Trump, and Pence are all sitting in the office together, right here. Donald Trump asked James Comey to end the Michael Flynn inquiry in February. Comey wrote in a memo. Of course, the memos that now everybody learns existed. This is the very moment they were all meeting. Now, during that approximate time of that Oval Office meeting, Peter Strzok texts Lisa Page about information relayed to him by Tashina Guar. She worked in justice on behalf of Rod Rosenstein, who's at the White House at this very moment. Talked to Tosh, no significant update. She will let me know availability and redacted. Passed on a couple of points. Rod Rosenstein wanted to make sure we knew, consistent with what he told Andy. So Rod Rosenstein is keeping Peter Strzok abreast of what he and the president are all talking about, likely in relation to getting Robert Mueller appointed as a special counsel. Later that night after the meeting, according to the Mueller report, you've got some additional events that take place. Tashina Guar was taking notes, presumably involved in this meeting in the Oval Office, and she was sending them to Lisa Page, Rod Rosenstein, and Andrew McCabe. At the meeting at Main Justice appears to be happening later that night, after the visit at the White House with Robert Mueller, and the meeting appears to be between Lisa Page, Rosenstein, McCabe, and then Tashina Guar taking these notes. Why is that meeting on the same day as the Mueller Oval Office meeting important? Well, Rod Rosenstein and Andrew McCabe go to brief the Congressional Gang of Eight, which at that time included Paul Ryan, Nancy Pelosi, Devin Nunes, Adam Schiff, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, Richard Burr, and Mark Warner. On the afternoon of May 17th, Rosenstein and I sat at the end of a long conference table in a secure room in the basement of the Capitol. We were there to brief the so-called Gang of Eight, the majority and minority leaders of the House and the Senate, and the chairs and ranking members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. Rosenstein had, I knew, made a decision to appoint a special counsel in the Russia case. After reminding the committee of how the investigation began, I told them a few additional steps we had taken. Then Rod took over and announced that he had appointed a special counsel to pursue this investigation, and that special counsel was Robert Mueller. Now, immediately following this Gang of Eight briefing, Deputy AG Rosenstein notifies the public about Mueller's appointment, and it's pretty clear after you review all of these various steps, the related releases that came out later, and paints us a picture of how these people were working together. They were all hiding certain bits of information about this ongoing FBI investigation, about James Comey and these people's attempts to leak this stuff out to the public, and they were doing it in a coordinated fashion to make it look as if this had to happen. And, of course, they were upset about James Comey being fired. So McCabe launches that criminal investigation for obstruction on May 10th. Rosenstein immediately contacts Mueller after conversations with this small group of people who were Comey loyalists. That group talks about releasing information to their friends in the media, and they end up releasing that, and the rest is history. So on May 15th, when the whistleblower finally gets notified these memos exist, it was only because this group had released it to the media, and they already knew that Robert Mueller was going to be appointed before that leak even happened. So Comey, his lawyers, his lawfare allies, this small group of loyalists within the DOJ and the FBI, they coordinated the leak to publish the New York Times article the very day Mueller was going to be interviewing with President Trump in the Oval Office, because they already knew Mueller was going to be appointed the next day to be the special counsel, and the New York Times leak was cover and ammunition for Rod Rosenstein to make that appointment possible. So this is all part of the exact same grand conspiracy investigation, the grand conspiracy to destroy President Trump, each and every one of these people working together. And I cannot wait to see James Comey be indicted for the release of those documents. Now, the cover-up of this conspiracy is evident from the conflicting stories. David Archie testifying to one thing, and then it coming out later that he and this small group had this information prior to them admitting it to anybody. So the small group successfully organized this operation to get Robert Mueller appointed, and then the same team sat down to classify the material that might expose their efforts to set up the special counsel investigation. Because they knew about the leak from Comey. They knew that Daniel Richman was going to put it out. They knew the New York Times was going to release this story. And all of the efforts they made were in service of that grand conspiracy. Yes, treasonous? I think so. Now, one interesting thing that might happen is if and when James Comey is indicted for the release of this classified information, there's a very likely chance that he's going to attempt to suggest, because remember, only one of those documents had any classification markings on them. So James Comey is probably going to say, well, this wasn't classified information. These were my personal notes. I sent them to my personal attorney, Daniel Richman. So there was no law that was broken. But this is where it gets interesting. The trap that was set was initially set by the Biden administration. It all goes to another special counsel investigation, the Jack Smith investigation. Because although the classification markings may not have been on the documents at the time that Comey actually released them, James Comey is not the one who decides what is classified and what is not. So going back to the Mar-a-Lago documents case, the DOJ and the FBI special counsel, they said to the Florida court that they would not reveal the contents of those Mar-a-Lago documents because those documents were classified under national security grounds. Now, I'm sure everybody here remembers President Trump's legal position was always that he wanted to make this content public because there was no classified information in there. And even if there was at one time, President Trump had declassified all of those things. And because he was the president, he could classify or declassify whatever he wanted. So in order to clear this up, Judge Eileen Cannon appointed that special master to review the documents, and the FBI and Jack Smith were not very happy about that. They filed an appeal. They demanded that Eileen Cannon stop what she was doing because they wanted to do whatever they could to stop the Trump team from ever reviewing what it was that Jack Smith said he had and what was allegedly classified. Smith didn't want these documents to be made public. He also didn't want the documents to be revealed to President Trump, because if that reveal happened, well, then, of course, President Trump would be able to defend himself. And he would say, well, nothing here was classified. And the DOJ and the FBI's position was that the documents were too sensitive. It was top secret, classified, SCIF level stuff. National security implications. They put out a bunch of insinuations in the press suggesting that President Trump had somehow endangered the national security of the United States. It might have been related to something related to nuclear weapons, whatever it was. It wasn't that. We all know it wasn't that. But the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the classification status of the Mar-a-Lago documents, at the end of the day, was whatever the national security apparatus of the federal government, meaning the DOJ, the FBI, and the intelligence community, said it was. So the judicial branch could not interfere with the classification status by the executive branch, because under the executive branch, Joe Biden, he had reclassified everything. So the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with that government position, saying that any documents defined as classified by Joe Biden's White House would be considered national security, and they should not be disclosed to the defendant, Donald Trump. So the Court of Appeals essentially determined that the only thing that matters are the definitions of classification handed down by the executive, and doesn't matter really what the judicial branch says. So what this means is that if the government charges James Comey with the dissemination of classified documents, they can do that because if the president says they're classified, they are. And the precedent to do this comes from Donald Trump's own classified documents case, the Mar-a-Lago trap. The Biden White House set the perfect bear trap for James Comey. And if the government of the United States under Donald Trump says these documents are classified and charges James Comey with these classified documents and says, hey, you know what? There's other stuff, but we can't tell you. And we can't tell the American public because it's classified, then there's nothing James Comey can do. And there's nothing that he can do to defend himself against it, because the precedent was set in Donald Trump's own classified documents case. And that, my friends, is what you call a Kobayashi Maru. It is an unwinnable situation. There is nothing that James Comey will be able to do to defend against the entire situation. Lee Walden, thank you, sir. He says, I demand when these horrid monsters get rolled up with justice, we should have live stream everything from the cuffs to the millstone, all tribunals in Gitmo, the Cryptmo pay for the stream. That would be great. I'm looking forward to seeing that. All right, you guys. Listen, people often tell me, Zach, you're too positive. You're always thinking on the bright side. My friends, I have lived through so many dark years. I have seen this country sliding into oblivion. And every single day I see incremental changes showing me that there are truly some amazing things happening. Right now, the Department of Justice is going after James Comey in several different venues. I mentioned this yesterday too. How awesome would it be if they have 4 or 5 different DOJ actions going against James Comey in different venues all around the country at the exact same time, and they schedule different hearings in different states on the same day, just like they did to President Trump, making him go from Florida all the way to New York, making James Comey go from Florida up to the Eastern District of Virginia, and then immediately going over to North Carolina. Sure, give it to him. Do to James Comey and to these people exactly what they did to President Trump, and I will absolutely be there for it. Now, just want to remind you guys of this little bit that was released last August. It came out in documents that were released, I believe, by Chuck Grassley, that John Durham of the Durham Report was tasked with the investigation of the leak of that classified information that we just spent the last 15 minutes talking about to the New York Times. Now, his investigation revealed that James Baker leaked it with the instruction and authorization of James Comey. At this point, James Baker was certainly involved. James Rybicki was also involved. But there seems to be a core group of people, those loyalists to James Comey, who were all invested in making sure this happened so that we could get the appointment of Robert Mueller. So I think that this may become notable because there have already been a number of investigations into the release of this information. Thank you to Tomcat, who says, TGIF, awesome show. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate you, Holmes. Thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie. Thank you to One Thunder for the can. Thank you to Filter Dog, who says, U.S. leaving Europe. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth orders U.S. Army Europe to begin withdrawing 5,000 U.S. troops from Germany within 1 year. 5,000 is a start, but we've got 34,000 there. Let's get them all out. Darla says, thank you again, Zach and Lisa, for the great reporting. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. Love you both. Appreciate you. Thank you, Darla. Thank you to Sean Joe for 3 cookies as well. Appreciate it. Lee Walden says, the promise of America is what keeps me very positive between we the people, the boss, and God Almighty. Nothing can stop what is coming. I am with you, my friend. Okay, now, take a look at this. The DOJ has just released a whole bunch of video from the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. Now, I feel like I've been pretty fair to the Secret Service. In a manner of speaking, the security worked because nobody died. But in another way to look at it, you could say that there were a couple of tremendous failures. For example, this is the door that Cole Allen walked into to put his gun together before running through the magnetometers. And Cole Allen enters the room, and then a canine officer, he hits on Cole, and the officer that is holding that dog seemingly tells the dog to back off, but the dog goes back to Cole Allen. Also, there's another person who is in this room who pops their head out after Cole Allen comes running through. Take a look. So that's Cole Allen. And look, the dog automatically follows him in. And the guy's like, okay, come on, dog. He pulls him back. And then the dog wants to go back again. And he's obviously having a conversation with Cole Allen. You know, what did they talk about? I'd like to know. And then 2 seconds later, he comes running through. How did this guy not see Cole Allen putting his shotgun together? You know, the other thing is the Secret Service has confirmed that the agent that was shot in the chest by Cole Allen, this guy right here. All right, so Cole Allen comes running through. He shoots this agent in the chest, and then this guy fires like 5 rounds, something like that, 3 to 5 rounds at Cole Allen. Doesn't hit him once. The dog did the heavy lifting in this case. The dog absolutely did. The officer should have known the dog was something was hinky. No, I agree with you 100%. Like, that's the point. Like, the dog hit it. The dog hit on this guy on 2 different occasions, and the guy like pulled him back, and he was obviously having a conversation with Cole Allen. But this guy right here, the police officer, fires 5 rounds point blank at Cole Allen, doesn't hit him once. Good God, so lucky he didn't hit any of these other people. Anyways, so like you've got fully like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got like 10 officers standing around, and only one of them realizes that something is wrong. Absolutely insane. So yeah, I mean, I still, good for them. I'm glad nobody died, but like this was a shit show from the way I look at it. I mean, you got all these people just hanging around. Really, it just seems like they're completely oblivious. This is not the time to rest on your laurels, guys. Fans of Jimmy Century love our Zak attack. Thank you for that, my friend. I really do appreciate you. Thank you, Trisha, as well. All those guys should be fired. The dog handler doesn't know the dog. Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like you're absolutely right. Let's see. Also, Artsy Jones says, hi, Zak, Lisa, and the fur babies. Zak, you are the best of the web, hands down, with analysis and explanations. Thank you, and God bless. Thank you for that, Joan. I appreciate you as well, my friend. Okay, now, just moving past that, I have a couple of updates for you from the brain worm-riddled TDS sufferers who decided in the wake of this failed assassination attempt that they were going to destroy their lives. One of those people was Kurt Bangstad. He was the guy who owns the brewery in Wisconsin, Minocqua Brewing Company, who said that he was upset that he was unable to give away free beer because the president was still alive. Well, the Secret Service figured out who he was and where he lived, and they actually called him, and they were attempting to set up an interview. So what did Kurt do? He published the email. He published the voicemail of the Secret Service agent, and he left the Secret Service agent's name and phone number in his post on Facebook. And then he suggested to his followers that they call and harass the Secret Service agent. This is a crime in and of itself, over and above the rest of what he's done. So Kurt posts, this is the voicemail they left me. Can't attach the actual audio. Working fast here. Hi, Mr. Bangstad. My name is Special Agent Redacted with the U.S. Secret Service. We have some information that's come to our attention. Honestly, just had a couple of questions we wanted to run by you. If you could give me a call back at the number, and he repeats it, I just have a couple of questions. If we can able to talk through this today, we would really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Take care. This agent was very, very nice and accommodating to him. You know, he didn't say you're going to be required to come into a federal facility tomorrow. Anyways, so here is a video of Kurt, and he also says right here, somebody says, so should we call them back? And Kurt says, yes, flood the effer's phone number, and no, they ain't putting me away without millions of people being pissed as well.
By the way, all you MAGA guys that linked the Secret Service and the FBI, it appears that they don't give a crap about your links, but the fact that you overwhelmed them with links probably forced them to actually come here and question me, which, you know, maybe that's what you wanted. So you got what you wanted. However, First Amendment still rules, and we're never going to stop talking. I'm never going to stop talking. All right. See you later. Over and out. We're still here. We're still public. Ain't no one going to jail in the immediate future. Fine.
Well, I don't know. That may change, but he also posted this right here. Hi, folks. Owner Kirk here. The Secret Service and FBI have contacted me. I'm speaking with them with my lawyer, Fred, in less than an hour at Minocqua Taproom. I encourage supporters to come in if you can, to make sure they don't do anything to me. If you don't hear from our socials tonight, something is wrong. I am of sound mind and body, and I'm in no way of thinking of harming myself. If you don't hear back from me tonight, don't believe a thing you hear from the federal government about what happened to me. I've directed my team to start communicating through these or other channels if I'm imprisoned. Listen to my team, who will identify themselves as such instead of the federal government, if you want to be updated honestly about my status. Hopefully these agents are just as over this insanity as the rest of the country, but it's worth taking precautions because they are still part of the Trump regime. Hoping to chat with you on the other side of this soon to tell you what happened. I don't know if Kurt has come out on the other side, but here's an update. Okay, folks, Kurt Bangstad here. The dust has settled from last night's mayhem where I spent about an hour being intentionally intimidated by the Secret Service and FBI, posting warnings on our two largest social channels, Facebook and Substack, that I might be detained and that people shouldn't believe a word of what might be reported. The two agents who questioned me at our Minocqua location, after two other agents came by our Madison location and scared the crap out of my employees there, were very young. They seemingly didn't want to be there any more than I did, but under this administration, I wasn't going to take any chances. When they first showed up, I told them I refused to talk to them without my lawyer present, so they left and agreed to meet me later. I knew I had about an hour before they came back, so not only did I shoot off a post asking supporters to come by, I also posted the text of the voicemail I received from one of the agents and asked people to call his number and remind him of the oath he had taken to the Constitution, not the mobster cosplaying as our current president. The guy's eyes seemed kind enough that I actually thought he might have taken those phone calls to heart. I then live streamed the interview with these agents to get it all on record, and they left after about 5 minutes. The questions they asked me, being associated with any groups intending to assassinate the president, were absolutely ridiculous, but the entire event was pretty innocuous, probably because I had a lawyer present, and they knew they weren't going to let me slip up and say something that would give them a legal opportunity to haul me away. Regardless of whether or not this interrogation was innocuous, what happened last night never should have happened at all. Under no circumstances was the post I made last Saturday, which had me trending nationally on X by Monday, threatening to Trump. Notice I don't say President Trump. Under no circumstances should a business owner from northern Wisconsin, which is about as remote from D.C. as possible, be visited by the Secret Service and FBI and ask questions about his intentions to assassinate the president. Well, don't post things suggesting you might. There are two reasons why I was harassed by these junior agents last night. First, the right-wing social media bot propaganda machine was turned on to me, my company, because someone in Trump's regime thought it could capitalize on my satirical post to convince Americans that progressives are violent and dangerous. Now, you guys have done that all on your own. It then went after me, my fiance, and everyone who had posted on our page for the last week looking to utterly destroy us. I've gotten continuous death threats 5 days straight, which has happened to me before and doesn't really faze me anymore. But unfortunately, they were able to make one killing. A healthcare executive with 30 years experience was fired from Asperius Health for simply sending us a pic of himself wearing one of our t-shirts. There have been a lot of people who have lost their jobs, but either way. Second, someone at a much higher level in the Secret Service and FBI than the two junior agents who interrogated me decided to make an example out of me in order to scare the bejesus out of all of you. This is what they want you all to think. If this brewery owner can be questioned and possibly detained for wondering publicly whether Trump's assassination attempt was staged, so can I. That's not how it happened, though. And since I've heard other people dying from the brutal conditions in those detention centers, not happening, I think I'm just never going to say anything publicly ever again. Well, folks, if you're anything like me, and I know many of you Scandinavian Midwesterners are, you're stubborn as hell. When I get bullied, I dig my heels in even harder, and I hope you do too. What happened last night has convinced me to fight even harder, and I've got a plan on how I'm going to do it that I'll announce live tomorrow while being protested by a bunch of MAGA deplorables at our Minocqua tap room. Yes, although our Madison location is closed today to respect the nationwide May Day strong general strike, our Minocqua location is not. We open for the summer season today from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And like clockwork, the uneducated local yokel MAGA contingent has decided to protest our tap room tomorrow at noon, and I've decided to turn the tables on them. I'm going to give a free beer tasting to every progressive that shows up tomorrow at 12. And in the beer tasting, I plan to make a big announcement about my political future. He's going to run for office, as well as educate these smooth-brained cultists about the history of fascism and oligarchy in Germany and America. Joining me will be retired Army Colonel George Mason and a number of other retired military veterans to ensure my safety, because I don't trust the corrupt Minocqua Police Department or Oneida County Sheriff's Department to protect me or my customers. I'm organizing to get some large speakers to drown out MAGA and ensure that our words are heard by the whole town, as well as our customers, who will also get to enjoy some tasty beer. I've also been in contact with a nearby Indivisible group who are going to be bringing a giant fist because, of course, we need a giant fist. Folks, I'm about as pissed off as you are, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, that's it. I guarantee you he's going to be running for office now. Anyways, that's hilarious. All right. Now, speaking of people getting fired, meet Miss Kellyanne Russo. Kellyanne, until yesterday, was a 4th grade teacher at Pinecrest Academy, Avalon K5 out of Orlando, Florida. And here she waxes philosophical about who might be able to assassinate President Trump.
I'm just going to say it. If anybody's going to do it, anybody can successfully do it, it's going to be a Florida man. It's going to be somebody from Florida. So, if anybody can do it, it has to be somebody from Florida. Who else? Like, let's be real. It's got to be a Florida man.
Well, here is Kelly's profile at Pinecrest Academy. As of today, she is no longer teaching in the state of Florida. And this is coming from the Florida Commissioner of Education. Her teaching certificate has fully been revoked. She's not just fired from Pinecrest Academy. She is no longer a teacher at all in the state of Florida. And she has just gotten what she deserved. Love it. All right. Now, I have, thank you to Principal Enigma. Ain't no point in talking with Rick. No truth involved in what you say. Number one Indiana dad says, I'm sitting at a soccer game, 50 degrees, 30-mile-per-hour winds with scattered rain, listening to the best, most knowledgeable Patriot podcaster in the business, up 3-0 at half. Win-win. Good for you, brother. Good to see you out there. Thank you so much. Principal Enigma. Yeah, I should have proofread that. Try again. Ain't no point in talking if there's no truth involved in what you say. There we go. That one makes a little bit more sense. All right, guys. So yesterday I had told you about this upcoming article that was going to be released by Katie Talento. So Katie Talento, she's a Harvard-educated infectious disease epidemiologist. She's also a naturopathic doctor. And she also was working in the Trump White House during that first term. Now, Katie, prior to her transformation into a MAHA promoter, Katie was all about traditional medicine. You know, vaccines are the gold standard, that kind of stuff. She was a skeptic of anybody who would suggest that they were perhaps dangerous. She was the one who basically kept RFK Jr. out of the White House during President Trump's first term. But now she has completely turned around 180 degrees. And back in 2017, she was working as President Trump's lead health advisor on his domestic policy council. And basically, she believes that the modern health regime is essentially a cult based around the idea of medicine. After she was basically tasked with keeping RFK Jr. out of the White House, she started sort of investigating on her own during the pandemic. And she saw the movie Vaxxed. She really started looking into RFK Jr.'s work. She also started learning about a lot of suppressed treatments, things that we've talked about on many occasions, things like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. She saw the direction the country went under the Biden regime with the COVID policies like lockdowns, vaccine mandates, things like that. And she had a complete and total change of heart. She realized what she had done. She also realized how much damage to the country was likely done because RFK Jr. was basically banned from coming to the White House. And she started thinking about the individual people that had been hurt as a result of her basically playing the Washington, D.C. swamp game. So RFK was going to be on President Trump's proposed Vaccine Safety Commission. It was actually RFK Jr.'s idea. And she was essentially pressured by people inside the health industrial complex like Fauci and others, and basically told that RFK Jr. can't get anywhere near this stuff. She said, it was my job to make this problem go away. Because she was brainwashed, she was all in. So Katie now understands what she did, and she has basically come forward to apologize for all of it and to praise President Trump's efforts and RFK Jr.'s efforts to make America healthy again. It is really an interesting article for a number of reasons. First of all, because it gives you an inside scoop into how the Washington, D.C. swamp works. Katie is not unique in Washington, D.C. I mean, unfortunately, this is how things are done in D.C. This is how they're done in the swamp. You have gatekeepers all over the place. They basically stand in the way of certain relationships moving forward. And RFK Jr. is just one example of how that happened in Trump's first term and how it almost, frankly, happened again in his second term. And thank God, RFK and President Trump, became, personally acquainted, and there was no opportunity for gatekeepers to step in. Doesn't mean that people didn't try, but we've seen it time and time again with other people in the administration who might have been held back from being able to come in and have an effect. So I just wanted to once again give some respect for Katie to, for the fact that she came forward and she admitted to this and giving an inside look into how these things are handled behind the scenes, because I can only imagine how many other people, brilliant minds with great policy suggestions, have been stopped from being able to get involved and have an effect like RFK Jr. has, and wondering how many people are dead, dying, or just sick as a result of these people being held out and stopped from getting involved. So if you want to follow her, she's Katie Talento on X, and her Substack is at katietalento.com, Katy. I would definitely recommend it. It's interesting. All right. Now, also coming from the coming from ICANN. ICANN is an organization that seeks to put out all kinds of information related to medical freedom, medical health, and of course, focusing a lot on vaccines. But basically, recently they got a hold of a bunch of raw data from the military. They wanted to see what was the immediate effect of the COVID vaccine mandates on America's military. And essentially, as soon as the shots began to be given, they learned that there was a huge uptick in disability claims that were arising directly from these COVID-19 shots. That should surprise no one. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Now, they started immediately developing cardiovascular and neurological symptoms in the U.S. military starting in 2021, which is, of course, the first year that these vaccines were mandated for all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. Evidence shows there may be as many as 598,000 service members that have experienced some level of adverse event from the various COVID-19 jabs. So in 2021, ICANN attorneys successfully defended Army and Air Force service members who had been denied religious exemptions for the jabs by military authorities. These members were able to avoid getting jabbed, but more than 98% of military personnel just complied with the mandate. So they did a FOIA request for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and they asked for a detailed account of disability compensation claims that were made by all service members, active, reserve, National Guard, and they looked from 2015 to 2019. And then they looked from 2020 to 2024. So they have pre-COVID, post-COVID, and they can take a look at it. And what's, immediately obvious is that claims were basically flat from 2015 to 2020. And then immediately following the introduction of these jabs, the disability claims take a hard curve, and they immediately start to go up. So the data reflects not only the afflictions that I mentioned earlier, but there was a huge increase in myocarditis, pericarditis, encephalitis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, a whole host of different illnesses that previously were stable among veterans and service members. This was across all active duty personnel, reservists, and National Guard members. Everybody has probably expected that myocarditis and pericarditis are just par for the course. Most people that come forward seems to be the most popular adverse event, but there's nothing mild about it. Even though, a lot of people seem to get it, it does cause major cardiac damage. And it takes somebody from, previously healthy status into basically incapacitated status. They're not going to be ready to continue to serve in the way that they did before. And the other things like brachial neuritis, transverse myelitis, thrombocytopenia, purpura, and intussusception. I don't even know if I said that one right, but lots of different things that can go wrong with this. So from that FOIA request, between December 2020 and December 2025, there were 5,890 VAERS reports that were submitted on behalf of the military. And they were all adverse events from the jabs. There is one estimate that says that fewer than 1% of vaccine adverse events are reported. So if that's true, then the actual number of military members who suffered an adverse event after receiving one or more of these jabs, again, could be as high as 598,000. That's basically 29% of the entire population of the U.S. military for 2025. So very, very serious situation. And, I think people have assumed for a long time, this is why it's been so difficult to keep people in the military. Certainly under Biden's administration, we were at record lows, probably because a lot of people had to drop out. They could no longer stay in the military. They couldn't re-enlist because they were just simply too sick to do so. Okay, now, this is a story I have been unable to get to for the last several days because there's just been too many things to talk about. But it was announced on the 27th that Norway and France had launched a joint probe into some Norwegian diplomats that we have spoken about previously because they were listed in the Epstein files. So there was the purchase of an Oslo apartment in 2018 at a price that was far below market value. And it turns out that that was a transaction that was facilitated by Jeffrey Epstein for the benefit of this couple. Now, Norwegian police are cooperating with their French counterparts, investigating how these top diplomats, Mona Juul and her husband, Terje Rod Larsen, were suspected of alleged corruption due to their ties with Jeffrey Epstein. So, as soon as this investigation was announced, well, nearly as soon as this investigation was announced, their son allegedly committed suicide a couple of days later, which is certainly very concerning. Now, this young man, Edward Juul Rod Larsen, was only 25 years old, and he was found dead in his Oslo apartment Wednesday, just a couple of days after this investigation by the Norwegian and French police was announced. what's also interesting is that Jeffrey Epstein had given him somewhere between $5 and $10 million in his will. I'm not exactly certain of the number because I've seen people quote 5 and 10. So we're just going to say somewhere between 5 and 10. We had learned about this when the files were initially released. And the first thing that I thought was, well, gosh, that is very strange. We do know that Jeffrey Epstein had his eugenics program where he was looking to craft the most perfect genetic specimens using his own DNA. And the first thing I thought was, is this kid really the son of Jeffrey Epstein? We do know that Jeffrey Epstein, in the course of his emails, talked to multiple people about the fact that he had children that were born of his seed. We just never learned who those children were. So the fact that this kid dies a couple of days after the investigation begins, was he suicided? Did he perhaps learn the truth of who he was and he couldn't deal with it? Anyways, so he was found dead, and there's really no more information that we know about it. And I'm just looking forward to seeing what happens in the future. Gordon says, I wish Epstein gave me $5 million. Hell yes. $5 million would be awesome. All right, we're going to go ahead and close it out right there. I need to get some dinner. My son is going to be leaving tomorrow, and I want to make sure we get a chance to hang out tonight. I do have the program tonight on Badlands, which will be, Only Lands. So if you guys want to join me there, you can be there tonight at 10:30. That would be awesome. Otherwise, I'll be back Monday. Before we go, let me remind you about our friends over here at Rumble. You guys, you know that America is coming up on a big anniversary right now. Our 250th birthday. That is 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the world's greatest experiment in self-governance, which means it's the perfect time to tell your kids about why this country matters, not just the flash and the glam, the fireworks and the hot dogs, but the reason behind it all. And this free kids guide to America's 250th birthday is honestly a great way to teach your kids about how America began, who those founding fathers were, what they risked, why the ideas they fought for still matter. This guide is going to send them back to the moment when those brave men signed the Declaration of Independence. They did so knowing full well they were risking their lives for freedom. It's going to break it all down in a way they can both understand and enjoy. It's not going to water it down. It's not going to make it like boring schoolwork. So if you care about raising kids who know where this country came from, or grandkids, and I know that you do, telling them why it's worth preserving, this is something that you're going to want to grab. And the best part is it's completely free. You just pay $2 for shipping and handling. So to get one, you just go to freeusabirthday.com. That is freeusabirthday.com. And the Kids Guide to America's 250th birthday is there for you and them right now, because America's story matters. Make sure the next generation knows it. All right. Thank you very much. And thank you very much also to Sean Joe for 1, 2, 3, 4 more cookies. Thank you to Filter Dog, who says, a court has slapped down cheating leftist election lawyer Mark Elias attempting to force Louisiana to hold 2026 congressional elections under the racially gerrymandered map. That is good. All right, you guys, do me a favor. Hit the like button. Hit the thumbs up wherever you might be. I would sincerely appreciate it. And if I don't see you tonight, then hopefully I'll see you Monday right here at 5 p.m. for another episode of Red Pill News Live. Check out all of the sponsors of the program in the description of this video, no matter what platform you're on. Lots of good information. Also my website, redpill78news.com. My email is there, audio podcast, everything you might want. Hope to see you guys. Peace, love, bye. Oh, you guys, I completely forgot to mention that today was the final episode of InfoWars. Alex Jones going off the air under the InfoWars brand. It is now going to be the Alex Jones Show, and he's going to continue broadcasting just under a different name.